Hi, I'm Matthew Peak for Rock Island Auction Company, and today we're going to talk about Smith & Wesson revolvers. There's something spectacular about Smith & Wesson revolvers. Whether it's the history or the innovation, Smith & Wesson has been at the forefront of gun making since the 1850s, and they developed the volcanic pistol. And from that gun to Wild Bill Hickok's number 2, all the way to Dirty Harry's Model 29, Smith & Wesson has written the book on revolvers. I have a lot of guns on the table here today, all of which are going to be in our Sporting and Collectors auction February 14th through 17th. Yes, that's 4 days of beautiful guns. And I want to talk to you a little bit about some of my favorites that are coming up in this auction. Starting off with the Smith & Wesson 320. The Smith & Wesson 320 is a revolving rifle based on Smith & Wesson's very, very popular number 3 break top revolver. Now, Colt had already had a revolving rifle out there, but it was subject to chain firing and catastrophic failures. So Smith & Wesson developed the 320 with a new 32 centerfire cartridge that did not chain fire. Now, this gun was requested by the end user. They gave a lot of feedback on the detachable stock and the long barrel. As much innovation as went into this pistol, it wasn't very successful. Only 977 of these were ever made. The reason being is, if you've ever handled a revolver, you know that in front of the cylinder is not a great place to put your hand or finger if you want to keep them. Fire, unburnt powder come out the front of the cylinder and create an unpleasant place for your hand or arm. And imagine holding that rifle and firing rapidly, and all that pressure and fire goes into your forearm. Now, you could see this gun in a movie, and Lee Van Cleef sitting over a rock, aiming down at the bad guys. And it's a cool movie gun, but it's not very practical. And so it was discontinued because it wasn't very successful and only 977 were ever made. It becomes very collectible. And we have this beautiful example in our upcoming Sporting and Collectors auction. Now, moving on with innovation is maybe one of my favorite guns of all time. The Smith & Wesson New Century, or what we've come to know it as, the Triple Lock. Now, in Hamilton Bowen's book, he calls the Triple Lock the finest double-action revolver ever produced. Developed on a new frame for Smith & Wesson after their hand ejectors came out the 1903-1905 with the swing-out cylinder, they developed the end frame, this big frame, to handle the 44 Special cartridge. At that time, one of the most potent cartridges you could have in a revolver. It was hand-fitted, beautiful gun, very, very expensive to make due to the fact that it has 3 locks. Now, Smith & Wesson normally has 2 locks, here and at the back of the cylinder at the ratchet. But because they were worried about this pressure of cartridge and they wanted to make this gun like a bank vault, they put in a 3rd lock right here. And that's why they call it the Triple Lock. Now, this took a lot of hand fitting and was ultimately too expensive to carry on. There were 2 other renditions of this gun, the 2nd model and 3rd model, that did not have the 3rd lock. But this gun was very popular as a whole. But after just about 10 years, the Triple Lock went by the wayside and ended up becoming, a coveted gun, whether it be by the Texas Rangers or Elmer Keith himself. This is a gun for the ages. Hand-fitted, beautifully done, relatively rare, and in this one, it's not in 44 Special. This is chambered in 44 Russian and is definitely something I'd like to have in my collection. But moving on, third, we have probably the most coveted of all Smith & Wesson revolvers, the Registered Magnum. Now, in 1935, Smith & Wesson helped develop, with the help of Elmer Keith and Phil Sharp, the .357 Magnum cartridge. Now, the 357 was the first Magnum cartridge ever produced and was very, very potent. To take on the likes of John Dillinger and Babyface Nelson, Smith & Wesson created this beautiful gun with maybe the most exquisite bluing and most wonderful engineering that a Smith & Wesson revolver has. With a hand-cut checkered top and a beautifully tuned gun, the registered Magnum is the gun that every Smith & Wesson collector should have. Now, only about 5,500 were made, and Smith & Wesson, while doing it, it became too costly due to the fact that they registered every gun. And you could buy it anywhere from an 8 3/4 inch barrel to a 3.5 inch barrel. You could pick your sights, you could pick what your trigger was tuned to, you could even pick at what distance your sights were put in. Smith & Wesson would do that for you. But it just became too costly, and eventually became a non-registered Magnum, and then the Smith & Wesson 27, a gun that I love to shoot, and if you haven't, you should take it out and throw some rounds downrange, because this gun is amazing. And this registered Magnum is a 1936 variant. It factory letters to everything that it has here with the exception of the grips. These are aftermarket Magnas, but it makes it no less desirable for the guy who needs a registered Magnum in his collection. Lastly, talking about innovation and the progression of heavy cartridges, it's the X-Frame. Now, in the mid-2000s, Smith & Wesson wanted to push the boundaries of revolver cartridges, and they developed two significant cartridges, the 460 and the 500 Smith & Wesson. Now, we have twin consecutive serial number Smith & Wesson revolvers. They're amazing. We don't have just one set, but we have multiples. Now, the 500 Smith & Wesson is the biggest production revolver cartridge out there. And if you're needing to take on a grizzly bear, it's a cartridge that I'd like to have in my revolver. And if you need to take on two, we just might have the trick for you. Whether you're starting your Smith & Wesson collection or you're looking for that individual gun to complete it, have we got a gun for you in our Sporting and Collectors auction, February 14th through 17th. We'll see you next time, and thank you.